Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to the few of us on the Western Hemisphere. So it's a real pleasure to be here and to have heard many, many excellent speakers. Let me start by reminding members of the audience to turn on their cameras, please, and keep in mind that the host has muted you and will unmute your microphone for the purpose of posing questions at the relevant time. So during the session, please type your question into the host, and when we get to the Q&A slot, the host will go through by order the questions are presented and unmute your mic to allow you to ask it personally to the speakers. So we have a really interesting group of speakers today from ongoing war and conflict locations. And we'll have one speaker who will be late, so I'll start by introducing our colleagues from Ukraine. We have Yuliia Lomzhets. She's associate professor and head of the board of Association of Legal Clinics of Ukraine. Her full bio is in the program, and since I want to give as much time to the speakers as possible, I'll be very brief with the introductions. And with her is Mariia Tsypiashchuk, also from Ukraine, who is the Transitional Justice Lead at the ABA ROLI program in Ukraine, part of the Healing and Accountability Through Human Rights activity, and is also a board member of the legal clinics in Ukraine. And joining us, who joined after the program was printed, is Artem Shaipov from the USAID Justice for All project in Ukraine, where for quite a number of years he has led legal reform and legal education reform, both pre-war and now during the war, to help the law schools and universities through Ukraine continue to teach quality legal education, as well as work on reform of legal education. And so we're very excited to have them here from Ukraine. From Armenia, we currently have Anzhelika Nazaretyan. She's an accomplished lawyer and works a graduate of the French University of Armenia Foundation and is teaching and running clinical programs at Yerevan Haybusak University in Armenia. And when she's done with her classes, we'll also be joined by Liana Malkasian, who's the director of the clinic at Yerevan University as well. So with that, I would like to start the program by asking our speakers what really has been their most difficult issue that they've had to confront in the hostilities that have been going on, the wars in their countries. And I'll open it up to start with Yuliia.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, Speedy. Thank you very much. And of course, I think it's not enough time for us to describe all damages, all this bad influence the war bring to us. But I want to say that according to our large analytical centers in Ukraine, for example, Kyiv School of Economics, the field of education is subject of greatest destruction. Currently, almost 400 educational institutions have been destroyed in Ukraine. 3,500 have been damaged, and 300 of them are university, and this affects absolutely all regions of Ukraine, both those located near a war zone and the most remote, for example, Ivano-Frankivsk region, and it's one of our westernmost regions. So we have to work in this condition and take account all these circumstances with damage, destruction, and these all problems with our electricity, internet connection, and so on and so forth. If we talk more detail about legal education, we conducted a survey in 2022 about the biggest obstacles, challenges, and needs faced in law schools, and Mariia can tell about it more detail, because She conducted it and analyzed the data. However, I want to dwell on the reform of law schools, and Artem is here, and he also, I think, can talk more about it. But a few years before the full-scale invasion, the process of developing new legal education standard and the corresponding reform began. However, due to full-scale invasion, this process stopped. And only in 2024 we were able to return to this issue, and the draft law is currently under consideration in our parliament. So I think Artem can tell more about it later, and I also can add something. So yeah, thank you. Speedy, sorry.
Mariia, would you like to add to that, and then we'll turn to Artem?
Yes, thank you. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. It's a great pleasure to be here and to listen to all the challenges around the world which relate to legal education, because we understand, despite the situation in Ukraine is unique, but there are very many common obstacles and challenges which I believe many of us face in different corners of our planet. Since we are limited in time, I think I would concentrate at this response on two major obstacles for legal clinical education, which I may outline based on the survey, which Yuliia has mentioned, but also on our later discussions and observations of our legal clinical colleagues. So first of all, is actually the functioning of legal clinics, which before the full-scale invasion, most of them used to work as a live client legal clinic. So they would accept clients in their reception offices. But of course, after the full-scale invasion, for many of the clinics, it became almost impossible. First of all, because sometimes the buildings, the offices of legal clinics might have been damaged physically. But I think even the greater challenge is that many of the students, they now are studying remotely and sometimes even from abroad. So it's basically impossible very often to bring students together who used to consult clients in a live manner or a live mode. So that influenced the whole concept of how to organize the teaching process, the training process, because like consulting and working with a client distantly is far different from working with a client in person. And of course, you can imagine like the full range of questions which arise from there, like confidentiality and many others. And the second obstacle, I think, is actually the more like dilemma questions, which have come much more than it used to be before the full-scale invasion. So imagine that you have a client who comes to legal clinic in any way, like remotely or in person, who starts to talk about, let's say, collaborationism. So probably the person who has been in the temporarily occupied territory or the like close to the front line. This person was in some manner cooperating with the enemy forces or the enemy regime. And of course, then the question arises how the students should process this, especially given that many of the students have been suffering from these circumstances by themselves. Maybe their relatives have been captured in this temporarily occupied territory. So this is just an example, but there are many more situations of this kind. So at this, I think I will stop, and maybe we can develop more on this later in the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariia. Anzhelika, I'll come to you in just a second. Let me open the floor to Artem for a few comments, as he's had quite a bit of work across Ukraine, and particularly in the eastern part of Ukraine, where the destruction has been quite substantial and horrific to the buildings and to the infrastructure. Artem?
Yeah, thank you so much, Speedy. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for organizing this event and for having me and colleagues from Ukraine and other countries who are suffering from war-related issues. And I have a couple of things to share with you. First is how Ukraine started to cope with what is going on. And I should say that the transition to online as a new normal during the early COVID time helped us a lot to adjust to the new reality that was brought about by Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And from our program side, we've been supporting our partners, law schools, the Association of Legal Clinics, by, for instance, in the early weeks of the full-scale invasion, by bringing people together in an online format, and sharing and discussing the ways in which we could cope, surfacing needs. And Yuliia already mentioned the survey that the Association of Legal Clinics did to find out the exact needs of the legal clinics in the time of war. But understanding the needs of legal clinics clients. For instance, millions of Ukrainians escaped the country and ended up in neighboring countries, in Poland, for instance. And the Association of Legal Clinics found the way to serve them, even in Poland, through international partnerships and experience exchange. And basically, the people who escaped had a chance to receive some quality legal services from Ukrainian legal clinics in collaboration with their Polish counterparts. So this is just an example of how the war changes the modalities of delivering legal services to the most vulnerable. And we've been also working on making sure that legal clinics can store data, because the Russians have been targeting university buildings, and for instance, in Mykolaiv, where Yuliia is from, the university building was targeted. And from our side, we've been developing a partnership with the Amazon Web Services to help legal clinics preserve their files and data in the cloud. So this is something that we were doing in the early weeks and months of the full-scale invasion, then working with our partners from the United States, with Speedy in particular. So kudos to Speedy for brokering a partnership with LexisNexis for providing licenses to Ukrainian law schools so that they can have access to legal databases and continue to teach using those materials and adapt to the challenges of the war. Also building bridges with leading law schools from across the world, from the United States in particular, the UK, and I would like to use this opportunity to express my gratitude to Steve Rosenbaum for his leadership in bringing together Berkeley School of Law and Ostrog School of Law, where Mariia is from, to support and to help Ukrainian colleagues better adapt to what is going on and provide assistance and share experience. We've been also working on, for instance, creating opportunities for online internships in the time of war. And we've been working on developing a set of model programs for student internships in courts, in public prosecutors' offices, in attorneys' offices, in the Ministry of Justice and its territorial departments. And we are now about to launch an online platform for student internships so that people can still gain practical skills even in the time of war. And we've been also very happy to collaborate with the Association of Legal Clinics on setting up a specialized legal clinic focusing on war-related matters based in Sumy. And it's been quite successful and already provided legal assistance to more than 110 people, local people who have been reaching out to this clinic with various issues, including IDP-related issues, compensations, damages, and many, many other things. So it's been a comprehensive effort, and we are doing our best to support our local partners. And please feel free to reach out. We're happy to share more with you. and I'll be pleased to collaborate with many of you on advancing legal education going forward. Many thanks.
Thank you, Artem. Turning to Anzhelika, I don't see Liana yet, so I'm gonna rest with you to start to tell us about the experiences and your challenges in Armenia with the conflict that was there. Looks like the video froze. I think we've seen this issue from areas with conflict, I know certainly Ukraine has had a great deal of struggles as well with maintaining electricity and internet resources with various conflicts.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. We're wondering if you should try to go without video, which would give more bandwidth to the audio.
Yes. Let's try this way. Okay.
Great.
Yeah. So the case is about Artur Khachatyan, who is a young man who got accepted into Haibusak's Faculty of Law and International Relations in 2018. And then his life was dramatically altered when he was drafted into the Defense Army of the Republic of Armenia, and afterwards severely wounded during the 2020 military operations unleashed by Azerbaijan against Nagorno-Karabakh. This is the conflict territory. If anyone else doesn't know, this is the conflict territory, and the conflict started in late Soviet years. So after suffering significant injuries to his head and limbs, requiring prosthesis, Artur faced a new battle, securing his rights to the disability category and monetary compensation. Initially, he was denied by the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs. And he turned to his peers at the Haybusak Yerevan University legal clinic for help. And that's when the students step up, and despite their inexperience with such extreme cases, they fought for Artur, appealing the ministry's decision and successfully secured his disability category and monetary compensation after a long battle of 1 year. And to me, what makes this case truly unforgettable isn't just Artur's victory, it's the emotional and psychological journey the students went through while navigating an entirely new legal landscape, one shaped by war, armed conflict. This wasn't just a class assignment, this wasn't just a legal study, this wasn't just a case study, this was real life, this was their lives, and many of the students were impacted by the war themselves, as Mariia said previously in her speech. So the war forced them to step into new complex areas of law, such as humanitarian law, the Geneva Conventions, domestic rules for wounded soldiers, and international criminal law. And these are areas of law maybe they wouldn't encounter in a normal academic setting. But the legal complexity was only part of what made this experience so intense, because the students were living every aspect, as I said already, they were living every aspect of the armed conflict personally. Some of them had family members on the front lines, friends injured, missing, or even worse. There was a constant of fear hanging over them, fear for their loved ones, their brothers, their friends, and so on. And it's hard to imagine the emotional weight they carried while preparing a legal argument for a fellow friend who was suffering his own challenges, he was fighting his own fight. And it's very hard to stay concentrated on advocating for soldiers right when your own brother or best friend is risking his life in the same conflict. Yet, this was the main challenge, and we could overcome this. Despite all this, they found a way to channel their fear and anxiety into their work. The fact that they won this case, Artur's case, and they won many other cases, similar cases. Just this one is just the first one and outstanding. That's why I'm bringing it to your attention. is amazing, and it's even more remarkable. How they grew through the process and what outcome did we have because of the process. This wasn't just a legal victory. It was a deeply human one. They became more than just law students. They became fighters for their own rights. They were using law to make sense of a word that had turned upside down. It's this emotional resilience, this transformation, we could say. And this was so much more than law. This was survival, solidarity, and finding strength in the face of unimaginable hard situation, hardship, dark times for the students, for the lecturers, for the country, and everyone else surrounding us. So, however, I'd like to sum up on an optimistic note. And as I said, we had some outcomes, valuable outcomes. So those are for the students and participants of the legal clinics. Those are the new legal perspectives, being exposed to legal fields beyond their normal coursework. Real life success stories, because successfully navigating these complex legal areas, students registered meaningful victories, gaining hands-on experience and making an impact, a meaningful impact for their clients, their peers, their friends, the society. And increased professional flexibility. They were forced students to be quick, flexible thinkers, able to adapt to abnormal situations. They learned how to react swiftly to challenges, overcoming not only the legal complexities, but also their own, as I already said, their own personal struggles stemming from the conflict. I think this is it.
Thank you, Anzhelika. You raised really some very interesting and what would be deeply personal matters that the students and the faculty that you had to work through to continue to provide clinical services. And it opens the door to the question for Mariia and Yuliia with the clinics in Ukraine in similar or even more aggrieved circumstances. As your clinic suffered physically with damage and the infrastructure, the needs that the clinic could provide were also dramatically increasing. How did you deal with that with the students who had families suffering at the same time trying to help other people suffering? How did you work through those issues with the students?
Do you want to start, Yuliia?
Maybe with one aspect that one of the biggest challenges faced by our legal clinics was this lack of knowledge about trauma-informed lawyering, about soft skills we need in this situation, because our programs in legal clinics, they weren't focused on this issue, and we, with the support of our colleagues from USAID program, Justice for All activity, and our partners from England, from Poland, and from other countries, we get this knowledge and this specialist who help us, who help us to organize these workshops for our students and develop new programs. And maybe Mariia can add something.
Probably in this aspect, I would also step back a bit more than the beginning of the full-scale invasion, because for Ukraine, the military actions started like 10 years ago, together with Russian aggression, which was, of course, much less in scale than it is now. But in a few years, it became quite obvious that legal clinical supervisors and mentors have to work on several levels when they train their students. So, of course, like approaching a client is one set of things, which I wouldn't say was undeveloped in Ukraine, because we've got many manuals, we've got many training, schools, competitions, which would teach students how to cope with clients who have trauma, like different types of trauma. Maybe it was not that much focused on trauma caused by war, but some principles of psychological interaction would work for the war cases either. But then I think I might be now mistaken in the year of publishing that manual for legal clinics. Probably it was 2020s. It was also prepared with the help of the OSCE project coordinator in Ukraine. So we included one of the chapters. I think I was the author of that one, which was on the psychological issues of work, of teaching in the legal clinic. And actually already there we have described like a 3-level like model of psychological cooperation in legal clinics. So first it's like a plane crash rule, if I may say so. So first of all, you need to take care of yourself, which meant that the legal clinical supervisors have to work on their, work on their mental health, because they need to stabilize themselves and be sure that they can work with students. So find the ways, find support, psychological and so on. Then they need to educate their students and to invite psychologists. And I think we have a couple of very successful examples where legal clinics would cooperate with psychologists. Sometimes they are psychologists who work with the universities if the university has the appropriate specialization, or the department who has practical psychologists. And then the third level would be working with the client. So I think it was good that we started to talk about that before the full-scale invasion, because as you Speedy mentioned, like the broadness and the quantity of these issues grew immensely since 2022. But we knew that like majority of our legal clinical supervisors have already had some tools in their like toolkit or toolbox to work on that. And then, of course, we try to, as an association of legal clinics, we try to organize as many activities for legal clinical students, legal clinical supervisors, like summer schools, winter schools, some specialized training where we would cover this issue or how to cope with these kinds of matters. And the last thing I would mention that more and more legal clinics start to cooperate with different NGOs, especially local NGOs. Some of the legal clinics are involved into the process of documenting the war crimes and while other human rights atrocities. So they undergo some additional training, and like the retreat programs, and others. But unfortunately, that is not like a systematic practice yet. So I think that's one of the, issues that we need to consider on a more systemic level. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuliia and Mariia. Have we seen Liana join yet? I don't see her on the list. Anzhelika, have you seen your colleague yet?
Speedy, I think she wrote us an email just before that she will not be joining. You may have missed the email. So
I thought she said she'd be joining late.
Yeah, it wasn't clear. So it looks like she won't be joining.
Okay, well, we're at the 30-minute mark, which these responses, particularly with this both very personal and then also interdisciplinary issues raised by war, and how the conflict comes home, to the families, to the students, really raise a number of interesting questions. So I'd like to open the floor to the questions. Ido, our host, hopefully has some to start with, and would ask folks to please ask their questions of our wonderful speakers.
At the moment, we still don't have any questions from the audience, but we do invite them to ask.
I have a question. Sorry. Sorry, I didn't follow the rules for the chat.
Shame on you.
So, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation and letting us like a glimpse of how you did your work in Ukraine and Armenia. You spoke now about the support that you have for the clinicians, but I think I'm not sure, maybe I missed if your work is guided by how to deal with trauma, because we use this word a lot. And we are trying to understand how to be lawyers who work with trauma, who are experiencing a secondary trauma for us, and also the students that meet with the client that comes. And what I'm trying to ask is how you, as people who are under ongoing trauma yourself, are being able to support both the students and the clients in an ongoing traumatic situation that doesn't have like ending as like in the close future.
Answer first.
Let me try to start, and I'm sure my colleagues will have things to add. So I'm sorry if I didn't make it clear from the beginning. Yuliia was mentioning this trauma-informed lawyering or trauma-sensitive approach, right? It may have different names. So it is not yet set on a like general systemic level in the work with legal clinics, but we are like moving in that direction more actively, especially within the past few years. So we invite psychologists, we invite people like international experts who work in this area, for example, from Great Britain, from the United States, from Poland. There are also Ukrainian psychologists who have moved out and they work outside of Ukraine with the survivors and witnesses of war crimes. And they have also conducted some pieces of training. It was like one of the events, actually international client consultation competition, which took place in Poland this year. So we are trying to find ways how to put it like as integral part of every possible activity with the legal clinics. Just a few weeks ago, I think there was the latest summer school for Ukrainian legal clinicians, both students and supervisors. And this topic was also part of that program. So we are trying to deal with that. And just to reflect on your notion about this ongoing traumatizing situation with no end, I would say that a human being is very adaptive. And sometimes it's hard to believe, but we do adapt to the circumstances we live in. Of course, it's very personal and it strongly depends on where exactly person is situated. Although in Ukraine, it's quite hard now to say which place is safe because you never know where the next missile will actually come. But it's my personal impression that we are trying to live in between of these, scary moments. So when the morning comes, we drink our coffee and we just go and do our job. So this resilience, it's something which is being built based on the experience. And when you don't have any other circumstances, you just need to do what you can do. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Yuliia. Just if you have written papers or maybe like manual guides that written about your practice, if you can send them, it will be in English. It will be very interesting. Thank you. Sorry, Yuliia. Yeah.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much. And I want to add a small thing that we take our power to move forward, I think, from this perspective that we do something right. We help people, and our clinicians, they also help people, and it's help a lot. It helps a lot for all of us. I think that we do something right, good, and we help people. It's first. And second, now Association of Legal Clinics, we are in the process of changing our main documents. For example, it's standard of activities of legal clinics and model program, model syllabus of this legal clinical program. And we want to add this topic, trauma-informed lawyering, and this expand this psychological issue which Mariia mentioned before. So we in the process, because we had this activity, we had this training, but it's not enough, and we want to do more for clinics.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think
Sigal and Ido.
just want to say
Okay,
something really small.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to cut the flow, but two issues. First, we can continue on a follow-up kind of project or meeting to discuss Shilan, also ways of learning about these things from our colleagues in Ukraine. And I just wanted to say that on the topic of resilience and adaptability is that I just realized one of our Israeli panelists, Dana, she had to disconnect and run to the bomb shelter as we are running this webinar. And so just an example, she wrote me, good thing they waited till I finished my session and now I'm in the bomb shelter. So of course we have to have a sense of humor as well, but yeah, it's just how it's done. It's the way, exactly what you were saying, Mariia. Yeah, sorry.
What I'd like to suggest, and I'll talk to Sigal and Ido how to do this, is if we can maybe try to collect up some written materials and put them in a central spot that we could then notify the participants, like a Dropbox or a box site that they could then go to and pull down the materials. I know Artem typed into the chat room that they had materials they developed for education. And I don't know where Anzhelika went, but Anzhelika, perhaps you have some materials that you could share from the experiences in your clinic with the war that Armenia experienced.
Yeah, and in the first session, Bukola also mentioned that they have training, especially on how to deliver legal aid in war zones in Nigeria. So this would also be relevant to all of us.
And Anzhelika, you were going to say something?
Yes, we have some material, and I will kindly share it with all of the participants of the webinar. But I just one thing to add that the situations really are changing the way where our mindset totally, and the mindset actually is turned upside down. And we are learning to navigate through some really hard, complex situations. And which is really ironic is that those situations are making us very strong, because for a moment when you are a lecturer and you're dealing and you are facilitating such a case and you are with a law student, I'm speaking from my example, a law student who is completely lost in its own grief, and you should find a way to get these people together and put yourself together, and you are thinking for yourself that you cannot be weak because there are weaker people. Then you cannot be weak because there are people, they are in need, and you can just help those people and get them out of trouble as much as you can for the moment. And that's why armed conflicts and such situations, even if we develop some trainings or develop some materials, hands-on experience, and how we personally and directly make our way through those things, those situations are creating the professionals we are. And this is what I said to my students, that we should not be ashamed of the situation that happened to us, but we should become stronger, and this is what turns us a really good lawyer, the lawyer of tomorrow. And this helps. This mindset helps. In a normal setting, I wouldn't say this to our students, but because this was a very unusual, unprecedented situation, this helped really. For in such situations, this mindset helped, that by helping another, I'm getting stronger, and this is just pushing me, giving the strength to push forward and to help people in our own capacity.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Anzhelika, is your clinic or school working with any foreign institutions, and are they helping provide support to the clinic for these issues?
Yes, we are working actually with the Institute of Estonian University of Rosenberg, I guess, if I'm not mistaken with the name, just with the spelling. But we are actually in a close relationship, close partnership with that university. Yes, for the legal clinics, actually.
Excellent. And I know that the schools in Ukraine have been very proactive at reaching out to other institutions to provide sort of support and resources when possible. Artem, you've typed in a couple times that you have resources that are available.
Yeah, thanks, Speedy. So I just mentioned in the chat box the teaching manual on international criminal law that we helped develop for a network of Ukrainian law schools. And this is something that others can find useful as well. And I also shared your report on digital transition that we worked on in the early 2020. And this is something that helped Ukrainian law schools better adapt to the new normal. And as I mentioned from the beginning of my remarks, this is something that really helped the legal system, the legal education system of Ukraine to run despite the all-out war. So that's something that I find very important, and I guess many of you will be able to benefit from this report. I would like to highlight our efforts on building bridges between Ukrainian law schools and law schools from other countries. And yes, it takes a lot of time and efforts to reach out and to agree on certain things, to find people who would be willing to collaborate, but it's really worth the effort. Because these partnerships are quite fruitful in my experience, and we receive a lot of positive feedback from our Ukrainian counterparts and from our international partners who find such partnerships useful. And this is something that we have a lot of experience on, and I'm happy to share it in greater detail.
Thank you. Other questions? Sagal, your hand went up.
Yeah, thanks a lot for all the speakers. It's been really interesting and thought-provoking. I wanted to ask a question to all of you and see if any want to answer this. And it relates a little bit to what we heard in the previous session. It's one of the challenges that we have in Israel, where we have sort of two sides of the conflict studying with us and teaching with us. And that creates, it potentially creates a conflict within the student body, within the faculty. And we heard about ways, that we overcome these challenges. And I wonder if it materializes, if aspects of this materializes in Armenia or in Ukraine. Students that empathize with the other side, and how is that sort of coped with and used as a teachable moment, or, how do you cope with that?
Who'd like to start? Anzhelika? Or...
It may not materialize in your case. I don't know.
Yeah. Yuliia? Do we lose Yuliia? So default.
No. I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. I was thinking because in Ukraine we have, I think we don't have two sides in our university. Yes, we have this issue which Mariia mentioned with collaboration. Yes, with, for example, different. I think different points of view in our military service, in this obligation of our men to serve in army, and majority wants to serve and help our country, but someone's no. And we have this issue in our universities. We have to discuss this constitutional obligation, this new issue, but we don't have this, for example, pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian issue at our program, because it's not. It's not issue in Ukraine. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe Mariia can add something.
Yeah, if I may, I'll try to briefly add to it. So this is true that probably even in the context of transitional justice, which of course you can see from different perspectives, like previous speakers said, it's hard to talk about transitional justice during the active ongoing war. But since we are having it like for 10 years and it had like different stages, like de-escalation, escalation, and so on. So of course, some elements of transitional justice have already started to to be enacted or something like this. And of course, there were like multiple surveys and research on the clashes between different societal groups. Like Yuliia mentioned now, those who are trying to escape the military service, trying to, I don't know, via some corrupt schemes or something like that, take some false document or fake document on their physical ability and so on. So in this aspect and similar aspects, we also put a very great attention to the ethical issues. So almost every training, like our standards for legal clinical activity, they have this quite broad component of ethics, which is being taught as an initial training for the legal clinics. And there we try to work with very real cases which have taken place during different years. And we always stress that students need to act based on a legal approach. So even if a person comes and tries to explain that there are different circumstances and this is why I want to avoid something and so on and so on, students need to look into purely legal matters. And if there are legal grounds to assist a person to provide a consultations, they would provide this legal consultation. If there are no legal grounds, students are being taught not to provide a consultation for a person who wants to just, avoid or go around the legal framework. And to control this, according to our standards, every consultation has to be provided in a written form. So this means that students are not allowed to provide consultations to people immediately in 99% of clinics who follow the standards. So the consultation will be checked by the supervisor, and the supervisor will actually see and will have an opportunity to check on what exactly was or is planned to be provided. So that is probably our response to materialization. And of course, the last thing that over these years, the branches of law which were not taught in law schools, like international humanitarian law, international criminal law, human rights during war conflict, and military law, meaning like the law which is related to the military service, they were like almost never taught in the law schools. And now the students, including students in the legal clinics, they gain more and more opportunity to learn these branches, which I think also helps a lot in coping with these matters.
Great, thank you. So I didn't know if Anzhelika had something to pitch in at all, or.
I'm sorry, I had poor connection. That's why I couldn't follow you. Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
So I think one question that I'd like to ask for all of you is that as you've had this transition and you've had this push away from what you do normally, your materials have expanded, such as with trauma and with other stuff. But when you do clinical law, it's always a question of fact plus law. It's never just law sitting in a vacuum. And how have you worked with students in what I would call a massive age of disinformation, a massive age of how do you separate out facts that are facts and facts that are made up and made to look real, with the students trying to understand and work with those? Anybody?
Speedy, if I may just jump in quickly, this is something that is related to comprehensive legal education reform that is going on in Ukraine. Two words: critical thinking. And in Ukraine, relatively recently, we started to assess critical thinking abilities in law school admissions. As critical thinking is very important for future lawyers, this is something that is quite important for developing a robust core of student body, able to process information and able to siphon away, fakes from facts.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, oh, sorry, can you hear me well? Because
yes,
I can hear echo. Okay. So when I'm trying to scroll in my mind cases which usually come to legal clinics, it's like a very field cases when you usually work with documents. So it's quite easy to separate the truth from not truth. So if the person wants some social care guarantees to be provided or something related to military service, in any way, you usually do not work with the OSINT, like with the open data, but you work with whatever is there, like legal, registered, and so on. Of course, it might be a great issue with the property which is being situated in the temporarily occupied territories. So that's a big dilemma, not just for legal clinics, but overall in Ukraine. And it's even not the matter of fake information, but rather like access to information. So this is why we have this specialized legal clinic, which Artem already mentioned. And this is why we actually modeled it like for the three components, like the legal aid, the research, academic research, but also advocacy, so that this legal clinic is involved and attached to the processes which go beyond just the mere work with legal facts. But with the disinformation and misinformation, I wouldn't say that it's something peculiar for legal clinics, but at the same time, we have like state programs. Maybe you heard about this. We call it like state in a smartphone. So it's like a great application, which is called DIA. It's being launched by the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Ukraine. So they also incorporate many like basic trainings into this DIA. It's very easily accessible, like literally in your smartphone. So they have a couple of like media literacy trainings in the DIA application, and there are like dozens, if not hundreds, of absolutely excellent courses. And also these courses might be incorporated into other academic courses, which are being taught in like simultaneously with legal clinics. So our students, they do have access to very highly qualified training, just not in the sense of legal clinic, because it's not such a big deal so far for legal clinics, I think.
Thank you, Mariia. That brings us to our time to leave this part of the program. I want to thank our speakers very much for a very, very interesting material. And I will turn this back over to Sigal to introduce our concluding remarks speaker, Professor Mark Drumbl.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the great session. Hi, Mark, Professor Drumbl. Thank you for joining us. We've had this sort of consistent convention, Mark, that we presented the speakers by their current affiliation as stated in the agenda. And I will hold myself back from presenting you with all your amazing experiences and affiliations. I will just mention that you're currently a law professor at the Washington and Lee University, at the School of Law. And the full BO, as with all speakers, are available on the website webpage, on the webinar webpage. But the gist of it is that Mark has been teaching as a visiting professor around the world in many different conflict zones. And I think you have very unique experience working also with legal aid projects in different war zones, as well as teaching in law faculties. And I think you could give us a great overview of the different challenges you encountered and maybe your messages to us. We've been here for the last 3 hours or 3 hours and a little bit. As you can see, we're all half sleeping. But we've really been able to zoom into practical experiences and cases of variety of legal, of conflict settings. And so we're really eager to hear your messages based on your rich experience in many different conflict zones. And without further ado, I'll say a few words of closing of the whole webinar after your closing remarks, Mark. Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, Sigal. Can you all hear me all right? Is that, am I clear? Good. All right. Well, it's a joy to be here. Thank you very much for including me. As Sigal mentioned, I currently occupy mostly an academic and research and teaching post, but I've come to this through a path that has involved and still involves a certain level of practical work in the field in conflict zones. I was a defense lawyer in the Rwandan prisons after the genocide. That's where this whole journey began for me. And I've also had an opportunity to do quite a bit of work on the ground with former child soldiers, anti-racist programming, and other kinds of post-conflict and during conflict justice attempts. I'm also very much kept abreast of everything insofar as Speedy is my colleague here at Washington and Lee. So he is always impressing upon me the great importance of both doing and thinking, acting and reflecting. So I really enjoyed listening, which is another art that seems to be a little lost nowadays, but I do quite like to listen. And I greatly enjoyed listening to almost all of your presentations earlier this morning. So I think what I would like to do is maybe make 3 points that are on perhaps a bit more of, I wouldn't call it theoretical, but bird's eye level that I think are important markers, important points, important lighthouses that we ought to keep in mind, I think, whenever thinking about legal education during armed conflict, whether that education takes the form of instruction or takes the form of clinical work. And my 3 points are as follows. And I think they're not only points, but maybe also some things we ought to be taking into account. The first is this. To me, law is no messiah. Law can only do so much. Law can only lift so much. Law can only run so far. Law can only sing so loudly. And law can only solve so much. And I think it's critically important in this space when we instruct that we ensure that we present to students the fact that law is part of a solution. Law offers a theory of justice. It's not the theory of justice. And I think it's very important in this space to retain a certain level of modesty in this particular regard. In my experiences, a lot of students, particularly ones that are afflicted in conflict zones, look at law in a very starry-eyed fashion. I understand it. They're hungry, they're hurting, they're desperate. But I think one of the big skill sets in a legal instructional capacity is not to overplay what law actually can do. So that's one of my initial sort of vibes. This leads directly to my second one. And this, I think, maybe comes up both in instructional work, but also clinical work and representational work and any kind of advocacy by human rights entities. And it's something I've encountered. And that relates to our intersection with victims. And insofar as my first point, law can only lift so much, I think my second point is we really need to manage victims' expectations, to be honest. I think disappointment is one of the cruelest of human emotions. I think there's a real risk of over-promising, over-marketing, over-inflating, overly obsessed with ourselves and what we can do. And then that feeds into victim expectations that frankly just cannot be realized and attained. It is very, very difficult to repair shattered societies. And to think that law can do this is overly altitudinous, but also to create expectations that law has this as a possibility can run, I think, a very risky terrain. I think we stand in fiduciary duties and relationships with individuals whom we try to uplift from iniquity. And I think in this regard, it's very important not to curry too much in the way of expectation. This is one of my major critiques of the International Criminal Court, for example, that a lot of its advocates and a lot of its interventions come cloaked with an over-marketing. And I think that just leads to a sense of victim disappointment. In this regard, I think one way out is I was very struck earlier with Donna's commentary on doing small things. Like she said, just a little thing to try, and consensus building at a very local level. I think that's really important and very valuable, and often just triggering conversation. So in this sense, it's for us to speak with victims, not to talk at victims, over-promising how amazing legal interventions can be. And then my last point on this, that I think is crucially important, is the reality that if law can only do so much and we don't want to overpromise, how do we still remain effective? And I think we remain effective by insisting that teaching law in conflict and pulling societies out of conflict into a better space is a deeply interdisciplinary effort. And I think we need to link and work much more closely with other areas of expertise beyond law. Everything from the psychologists, the economists, anthropologists, artists. There's a whole range of individuals with an incredible skill set in administering law and order during injustice and trying to move into just spaces. And I think we need to liaise much, much more with these particular communities. So I think in that regard, not seeing our educational and clinical and advocacy efforts as self-contained, but rather as porous, as open, as connected, as interconnected with others, in particular local constituencies, but also other areas of expertise, to me, is critically important. And this is my last point that I'll make, and it stems from something Hala said on an earlier panel that I thought was extremely powerful. And that is her view that one of the things that is important for us to do is to create conversational environments in which we accept other people's opinion. And I think that is very important. But law is awkward in this regard, because law is not so much about acceptance as it is about judging. It's not so much about ambiguity as it is about right and wrong, up and down, guilty, innocent, yes, no. That is intrinsic to the language of law. That's why law exists. That's its role. And I think it's very difficult to finesse conversation and acceptance with legal determination and legal judgment. And this is a very tricky space. I mean, one thing I've noticed, having written a bit and thought a bit about the role of international legal institutions following the ongoing violence, both in Israel and Gaza, that all of you have spoken about, is that, let's say the International Court of Justice rules, let's just say that it rules that there is in fact genocide in Gaza. That's not going to change people's minds. People who didn't think there was genocide are still going to think the same. And people who thought they were genocide, if the court ruled otherwise, would also not have their minds changed. And to me, in a sense, law and legal interventions can confirm things more than necessarily generate new ways of thinking. So I think it's important, once again, just riffing off of Hala's points. If we want to accept other people's positions, that can happen within a framework of law. But by the same token, we once again also need to think beyond law. But herein lies another danger, which is the big thing law does bring to the table. It's one important historical thing is in a deontological sense to say, sometimes things are not only painful and cruel and bullying, but are wrong. They are just wrong and need to be called out. So I think that is a hugely valuable function of law. So I think how we think about this deontological framing of right and wrong, together with the conversational framing that is also required to move ahead, is something that is very, very important for us to do. We have a lot of markers for that too. We have truth commissions, we have public inquiries, we have remedies such as reparations and so forth that can take us also out of strictly the penal context. So to end on this more optimistic note, I think law has a huge deal to offer, but I think it's the kind of thing that offers the most when we're also a little bit modest. It's not the easiest thing for lawyers to be modest, but I think it's a virtue. And that's the note on which I'd like to end. Thank you very much. I learned a great deal today, both from advocates within Israel, advocates within Ukraine, and I applaud all of you for the immense efforts that you're undertaking to build a better place. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, Mark. A lot of important messages and food for thought. And I think we need to have another webinar just to kind of follow up on your ideas and take them to the field. But at the moment, I want to wrap this up. Thank everyone that's been here since this morning, or it seems like a couple of days now, for their efforts and commitment. We will be in touch with everyone about follow-up and, communicating going forward. I'd like to thank again the sponsors who supported this webinar, and this is GAJE, the Global Alliance for Justice Education, and it is the Freed Gal Transitional Justice Program funded by the Freed Gal Foundation. And of course, a big thanks to the center at the Hebrew U that I'm a part of, the Center for Clinical Legal Education, as well as the Rule of Law Center in the University of Haifa, that is the Minerva Center for the Rule of Law under Extreme Conditions. Ido, my partner from Haifa, thank you very much for co-organizing this with me. Thank you to all the moderators, all the speakers, and we will be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Thanks so much. All the best.
Thank you, everyone.